Motion to up the agenda.
Move.
Second.
Discussion on the agenda. We have offered one change that Don is here and has been giving to some of you already, that an overview. We thought we could give this committee as a group a brief 4 or 5 minute update on where we are in the budget. Everybody's on the same page. If you'd like to do that.
Starting to understand it this year.
And between our number 5 and 6, we can. Update. All those in favor?
Aye.
Carried. How about our minutes of our August 22nd?
Approve. Second.
Any discussion on the minutes? All in favor?
Aye.
Carries. Is there any public comment?
You're not gonna get rid of ones.
Any supervisors not seated as committee members have any information to share with the committee?
Yes, I do. I'm want to talk about the ethics question that's up. And I'm mostly here because I really care about elections in this county. And on the way up here, I saw a state patrol officer pulling someone over for speeding, presumably, and I was like, thank you. So I believe in the rule of law. I believe that if we approve a code of ethics, we should hold it, take it seriously. And if there's a violation, we should act on that violation. I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know about the statute violations that are part of this complaint, but short term, maybe it'll win you an election and you'll get somebody on the board. But long term, it disenfranchises voters and people lose faith in the process and they lose faith in us as public officials. And I think that's a huge long-term loss. Fewer people vote. So I'm here to just say, please take this seriously. And it would be nice to actually see something happen as a result, so that our next election is clean and people are elected based on their position on the issues, their integrity, and not on making hysterical accusations about the opposition. That's all.
I'd like to make a comment on that also. Not on my,
Supervisor seated on this, the supervisor is not seated.
this is on behalf of Ryan.
All right, well, we're going on to,
He just called me.
you wanted to make a statement?
He wanted to make a comment. I can't do it verbatim, but he did want to indicate that he was intending to come to this particular meeting to make a comment about the letter that was written about him that was published in the paper. And that was not solicited in any manner, was not approved, never contacted about the letter that was published. If none of it was factual in his mind, and he, however, he did want to say that he feels that we should move on forward and kind of go on without any great type of punishment or anything in regards to the publication of that unsolicited so-called on his behalf. I think it was intended to, but it certainly was not his intention to come up with anything like that. He felt it was totally inappropriate.
All right. Have a brief update on our budget. Sure. Can you give up that PowerPoint?
There's more paper here than we're gonna go through, so that's the good news. Steve, I'm mindful of the situation you found yourself in this morning. I will try to keep it brief. I'll try and stay away.
I need it.
Got it? You don't need it? Okay. Okay, so let's go to this slide. Hey, we've got new information as of yesterday. We got an extra week in our budget process, thanks to Tracy noting that the date that we had at the end of the process fell on election day, and Malia jumping into the statute to read carefully, interpret, or whatever you did. And we now have a budget, it's going to get finalized on 11/15. So that's the goal we're working backwards from. And we're at this red dot right here where we're presenting an overview to committees. And then there's a fast shoot. It's like one of those slides. Whose kid likes to go down slides? I forget. But we've got a committee meeting coming up in a couple of weeks where we will present a first view of the comprehensive budget. What folks are getting in committee right now are pieces of the budget that are relevant to the committees. So as an example, yesterday in environmental services, we had land and water, we had land information. And that's the way we're working for the first couple of weeks here. But as of the 20th, you'll start to see all that pulled together. And then at the committee level for the next set of committees, actually for health and human services and for general government, we've got 2 more meetings. But for everybody else, we've just got 1. And that's where we do some very intense thinking about the budget at the committee level. So if there's additional funding requests from departments, that's where you'll get a chance to really burrow in and consider them. Got to pull all that back together for the October meeting. That's the one that goes to 4 in the morning. All right.
No.
Bring your pillows.
Bring your pillows, bring your sleeping bag. But basically, that's where the budget gets close to finalized, gets published in the paper on the 25th, and then again on the 15th. By statute, it needs to be approved. So that's kind of the timeline here. I'm not going to spend too much energy on the next couple of slides. I'm going to spend a little energy. So if you could go back one, sorry, budgeting principles. Yeah. I mean, the top line here is that we're going to go after the levy last. We look for extramural funding. We try to keep our expenses in line. We've got to think hard about what we're doing this year and whether we need to do it next year, because winter is coming and times are getting tighter. We had a couple of years where a lot of money flowed into the organization, and we're not forecasting that in 2023. Okay. You can skip this one. So let's talk about expenses and revenues. We'll hit expenses first. With respect to employee-related expense, there's really 3 important moving parts. One is cost of living adjustments. So last year, we awarded employees a 2.9% cost of living adjustment. This year in the environment, we're seeing everything from 2%, in one county up to 7%. Our nearby neighbors are in the 3 to 4% range, and we're looking at that 3 to 4% range for a COLA for our employees. The second component is merit. We've got a step progression with our employee base. Previous years, that's been 2%. We're currently looking at that 2% step. So for the max, we're considering is 2 plus 4, and the minimum right now we're considering is 2 plus 3, so 5 or 6%. I mentioned winter is coming and times are tough. We're going to have to likely squeeze other parts of the operation, tighten things up to do this for our employees. But we all know we're in a very competitive environment. We're in public safety, public works. Last week you heard from the sheriff. I think you probably hear from the folks in CSD at HHS. The other moving part is healthcare. There's some good news there, actually, relative to the rest of the world. We've got a healthy health fund balance of about $7.2 million, and there's a fair amount of flexibility around that. We could draw that down more if we need to. When we draw it down, and we draw it down the year after, and we draw it down the year after that, sooner or later, that health fund is going to be gone. We've got to really think about future times managing that. We don't want a hard landing when that happens. But in the short run, we've got some flexibility. And our goal has been and remains, at least for the time being, try to keep employee premiums flat or to minimize the increases. Let me just stop there and ask if there's any questions. Let me try to bring it home real
So
quick.
the healthcare piece with our last audit, the auditor recommended that we start drawing that down. Do a derivative based drawdown than the hard landing option.
Well, yes, and no.
You know what I mean?
So we have, an actuary that we use as a consultant who has given us now, I guess, 5 models ranging from a relatively slow drawdown, and that's where we've been, about $680,000, $700,000 a year. The auditor actually recommended getting rid of the money fast.
Yeah, we wanted it 0.
And that would make it really easy for me as general government director this year. And for our administrator this year, it would put a lot of strain on the organization and such. We've also modeled up to 1.5 million coming out. So from about 700 to almost double, to double that to about 1.4, 1.5. We haven't made a determination on it yet because we've still got a lot of planes in the air. But we're gonna likely land somewhere between that 700 and that 1.4. I mean, I think our working number right now is about 1 million. So that would be a little more drawdown than we've done in the past. Really just dealing with inflationary pressures and trying to avoid, hitting the tarmac real hard in 4 years. So we will keep you up to date on that. Yes.
What's their reasoning for drawing it down?
Well, we collected it.
Yeah.
And there's actuarial best practices around how much we should have. And it's about 1.5 million. So we're well over where we need to be from an actuarial perspective. And the auditors remind us every year that we've essentially collected money through budgets and not spent it. And they don't like that. Now, I love that. It's like it's a savings account for the county. When that thing dries up, we can see, well, what do? We've got to ask employees to cover more. Or we've got to do other things. We have to have fewer employees or something. We've got to spend less on healthcare.
Yeah, you probably remember the years when we were going broke on healthcare.
Yes, they certainly
And
do.
it was so close that we almost went away from being self-insured and looked for something different. And the wellness programs that they put in and the employee awareness of utilizing healthcare is what turned it around. And I'm kind of with Jay. I mean, I wouldn't mind if the thing got up to 12 million. I mean, I think insurance companies very seldom give breaks just because you're not using your insurance. So, but I understand too that if we're fully covered for the next, even the catastrophes, we're fully covered for the next 2-3 years with the funds we have. If it starts going the other way, then we need to go the other way.
And
But right now, we're
Russ is absolutely correct. I remember Malia going over and exercising at nights and with a whole bunch of other employees. Isn't that a fact? Just to get some health
Thanks for
back.
calling me out, but I've stopped doing that, Jay.
We built the program back up, it worked.
Well, and just in case you're not aware, I think you probably all are, we do have what's called a stop loss program that sits on top of our insurance. So we're protected against claims at the individual employee level or family level that are above 200,000. But we've got risk from zero, from the deductible up to the $200,000.
But just let me ask.
Yeah.
To your point about we've collected it. This is money that we've collected from our body of employees, right? And then we've not spent on that.
no, it's not all from the employee. That's the employer and employee share.
So we got,
No share.
yeah, so, and we've been thinking about more or less an 80-20 rule on this. So, yeah, so one of the ways we could alleviate some budget pain in 23 would be to take some out of that health fund and pay down some of the departmental expense and minimize increases to employees or to make, the cost flat. So so if we take more out of the health fund, what we'll do is we'll push some of it to the employees and push some of it to departments to help balance the budget. that's what we can do with it. But to Jay's point, you can only do that for so many years.
Right.
And then you run out. So, okay, any more questions on the, this is employee-related expense. We're going to quickly go through a couple more slides if it's all right. So non-employee expenses. So we've got really two big categories, operating that aren't employees and capital. And if you're not aware, so operating that's not employees might be things like when we pay mileage, our cars cost us dough. We got to repair things. Capital are purchases that are $5,000 or more. They don't necessarily need to be tangible. It can be software. But we can, those are depreciable assets. Okay, we'll go to the next slide. In many ways, I think this is the most important slide in the deck. So, you're coming into a budget situation. Where are your sources of flexibility and what's inflexible? There's almost no flexibility around the levy. All we can do is decide whether we want to take the maximum or not. In the last couple of years, we haven't taken the maximum. That's good for taxpayers. In tougher years financially, it puts a little strain on the organization. We don't have any control over sales tax unless we all go spend more money on Amazon, which apparently in some households is happening, possibly my own. But our sales tax revenue, we have last year under budgeted for that and exceeded the budget expectation. So we budgeted, as an example, 3.6 in 21, and we got 4.6. We got $1 million more than we thought. It was an extraordinary year, though, all the way around. So I wouldn't want to bank on that. It looks like this year will come in $600,000 heavy, more than we budgeted. And right now, looking into the future, we're thinking about somewhere 4.2 to 4.6 for 23. These are guesses, and we don't have any control. We have some control over grants. We can apply for more. Doesn't mean we'll get them, but we can apply for them. We have some flexibility with our savings account. I mentioned the health fund a minute ago. We have the general fund, and the health fund's part of the general fund. We have, after you account for a bunch of promises that are already in there, we have $10 million that we can do something with if we want. We can also bond. People don't like to talk about that. Our financial consultants tell us bond. They say bond to the capacity, to your capacity. And right now we want to keep our debt service to about $2.5 million, a little bit less than that a year. We have maybe $1.6 million of borrowing capacity. So if there are particular capital projects that the board wanted to undertake, it's a tool. Some people don't like it, other people do like it. So that's kind of the flexibility and flexibility continuum for us. And I think I've probably covered everything I want. Let's just go look at the next slide. Yeah, so levy, we're thinking it's going to come in about 2.43 million. As Brad Olson, doing the numbers on the back of an envelope, said, hey, if that's right, you're only going to get about $500,000 more than you did last year. Well, our operating expenses from 22 to 23 are going to be more than $500,000. So we've got to figure out how to tighten up a little bit. We've already talked about sales tax. Here's the big item. We're not going to have a lot of money flowing in from external sources that are sort of magical next year. So I think it's a time where we're going from a period of drama in the world, but largesse in terms of finances, it's going to tighten up. So we'll have to make some decisions about where we allocate our resources. Do we want to have a qualified, better compensated workforce? Do we want to have invest in more capital, expenditures? We're not going to be able to do it all. So that's kind of the 60,000 foot view for right now. I probably took more than 5 minutes. Happy to answer any more questions that you might have. And you'll be hearing more from us.
Well, I hope that when we're looking at the budget, we're talking about employee retention somehow. Because we're losing them right and left. We're losing really good people. So, I sent a kid down to interview at Highway and he got offered a job at Highway. But he calculated at home, he's like, can't make the change. He works for Hopkins Gravel and Webster. You know, so I mean, he's working, he isn't even working in the cities and he's making that much more money. I mean, I hope we consider that as we go forward here.
It's one of our priority, one of our key challenges.
Thank you.
All right, that'll bring us to discussion regarding citizens ethics.
So one of the, let's break it down into what the county can and cannot do as far as this committee and the empowerment as it exists with your current ethics policy. If you look at, let's assume that there's a valid complaint. Let's assume that this committee found that there was a violation of the policy. What could this committee do? And if you look on page 6 in your packet, and number 6 on the in the ethics code, it gives what the options would be if a violation was determined to have occurred. You could issue a written request to tell the supervisor to conform his or her conduct to the code. Chris Nelson is no longer a supervisor, so that's not an option. Recommend to the county board that it order the supervisor to conform his or her conduct. Again, he's no longer county board supervisor, so that doesn't apply. Or refer the matter to the district attorney's office. So what I did in this case, given the heightened interest in everything that occurred, I did have a conversation with the district attorney. I provided him all of the documents, all of the information, the entire complaint in its final form, the last form that they provided. He does not see a violation of the statute, and he is not going to be commencing an action. Now, I think that puts to rest what this committee can do. As far as modifying the language of the current policy or adding some things, the listserv for corporation councils often has conversations where they're talking about censure and other Robert's Rules of Order ways to deal with some supervisor that maybe they're being disorderly at meetings, maybe they're doing things outside of meetings, disclosing closed session information. You can certainly look at modifying the current code of ethics so that things like disclosing information from a closed session would have some type of a penalty or a public censure, something like that, or could expose a supervisor. But again, and I've said it before, trying to regulate speech when it's an opinion, it's just something I would highly suggest that the ethics code stay away from. The incendiary language that Chris Nelson used, I think the words that upset most folks, activists, extremists, activists, that's an opinion about somebody else's political behavior. And it's subject to the First Amendment. Whether you agree with it or not, it could, free speech often is offensive. So that's that as far as this particular complaint. Again, I don't think there's anything for this committee to do. Modifying the code of ethics is certainly something that, we can do.
A couple thoughts that I have marked up here. I think that mostly I've been working on section 7 and 9 with my little highlighter here. And it's pretty clear to me that we have a pretty clear laid out responsibility in our code of ethics. if you look at section 7, it marches us through. We accept the complaint. We define the purpose of an investigation. We give a written investigation notice to the accused, Chris. We look at the violations. We identify people to interview or not. And it's all laid out here on page 6 of our handout. And I can work on number 7 section. And then this group makes a written body of recommendations. So we can argue whether it's on or off again, but I think our job as a reconvened ethics board is to grapple with these questions and then make a recommendation after we look at it. Whether we disagree or agree is not really the issue here. It's really that we have to follow this process that we've really laid out in here. And I don't agree that we can just jump to the end of the conclusion and say, the DA says, oh, there's nothing there without having done any work. We didn't do any research. We didn't do any investigation. We didn't interview anybody. We haven't talked to anybody about this beyond what we have in this complaint. And the way I read the complaint is that they're not really complaining about name calling or using the wrong words. It's sort of, was it an overreach of power as a person in the position of board chair? Was it colluding with the different, the whatever, Farm Bureau and Polk County Republicans? That's what's at hand here. It's not a freedom of speech complaint. I don't.
But those things are not in your ethics policy. So those complaints could go to the DA, could go to the ethics commission, could go to the election at the state. So those complaints, again, while they might be valid, they're not something that this board is empowered or this committee is empowered under your ethics. Those are valid concerns, but they're not, there's nothing the county would have any authority to do. So I don't disagree as far as those other concerns, but they don't fall, they're not mentioned anywhere within this code of ethics. In addition, given the options for what can be done, it is clear, at least the way it's currently drafted, that this is to address currently seated supervisor conduct.
But it's still, the way I read section 7 and section 9, it still compels this body to do some kind of process. So the way we can throw that out and say, yeah, that goes over to the DA and this goes, we should still have a process and a report and some kind of a research, I don't investigation, whatever the word is, that we go through it as opposed to saying, no, we're done.
So and of course, I'm simply advising, but it would be akin to a judge getting a case and saying, you don't have standing, you haven't stated a prima facie case, but we're gonna hold the trial anyway. You haven't written anything down that gives me, the judge, the authority to adjudicate this case because you haven't stated standing, you haven't stated a case in controversy where I have jurisdiction over it, but I'm going to hold the trial anyway.
So we have this body, the executive, reformulated into whatever, however this works with code of ethics. We have no standing in a situation where a chair has alleged to have overstepped their boundaries. It sure seems like that would be our job as a body of code of ethics to compel some sort of research, investigation, process to answer that question. And we may say, no, it's not true, but I don't feel comfortable just saying, yep, it's not true, and we'll stop here. So I'm mostly just asking for a process of which we lay out really clearly in section 7 and section 9. And we can debate it later. That's not, I mean, we don't even, I would think that we can't debate it now because we only have one side of the story, which is the complaint. And I would think we would want to talk to people. I don't know, maybe we'd want to talk to the Republican Party people. We'd want to talk to Mr. Nelson. We'd want to talk to the candidates that were targeted and the candidates that weren't targeted. Stuff like that would be what I would say we should
That might be,
inquire.
that might be very, very, practical, whatever. What if they say I don't want to?
Well, they might not, exactly. Well, that's fine, but we.
And I'm sure that's what they're supposed to be. I spent many years investigating things. First of all, you gotta find out what were the damages.
Right.
By not complying with our rules, what damages were experienced. I don't know what they were, what the damages might be. I mean, Steve was the victim. He had some time involved trying to correct the improprieties that were, that he experienced, but he got elected. I mean, Amy got elected. Ryan was elected. I mean, I don't know that it was a result of the positive effect of the publications or not. I have no idea, but then there's no way that you could find that unless you poll the entire electorate to see why they voted, why and the way they did, and that's not even practical or legal. So I don't know. You got to find out, how are you going to punish for no damage? Number one. And how can you say, well, I totally disagree with what they did, but yet the result was favorable in my opinion. I don't know what it's been my experience that the more of a policy that you attempt to write or to correct, if that would be appropriate, the worse you dig yourself into a legal confrontation with statutes, powers above you, some of if you take a look at the police policies that are written today by, it's, you say, well, the cop shouldn't have shot that kid in the back because he was running away unarmed. And you have a policy that says don't shoot anybody in the back when they're running away unarmed. Boy, you really are overstretching your bounds. You've got to leave these things less restrictive. The simplest they are, the more control you basically have in the long run. So when it's being attacked and challenged in any manner. I mean, I totally agree with what Amy's position is. Boy, I tell you, I don't know how we could write a more explicit or restrictive or that starts dealing with anybody other than the people that are sitting on an active board. I think we'd have a serious problem without getting involved in attempting to get Malia some assistance and people that specialize in the law involving what we can and cannot do. Might be able to get some assistance through Wisconsin counties. However, they're going to draw the line on what they want to say too, and advise us as to how we going to control what people say. And that's going back to number one, First Amendment. It's a touchy situation. I'm glad we didn't get more complaint about it than we did. I think they're very. I know they want assistance and I wish we could afford it, but I don't know where we can step in.
Well, I think you're right. I don't even know in actually trying to Initially, when I said, when like a while ago, Lee and I were gonna meet and I was supposed to come up with some language for code of ethics. It was in the context of thinking about this issue that we have been struggling with. And then when I went through it and really read our code of ethics, I'm like, this is not bad. We have a process, pretty clear. But I think today, we have to, Jay, I don't know if you should even try and figure out what our new edits are. I agree. I don't think we should try and edit it at the same. I think there's two things going on here. There's, are we gonna follow the process outlined in section 7, section 9 in relation to this complaint? And then later deal with any editing issues. And I'm not at all thinking we can do any of that editing stuff today, but anyway, when I read it, I thought, well, this is not bad. There's a process. We go through it, pretty clearly laid out. Here's what you do. You form the ethics board. You know, you go through these different 6 items that we have laid out. That's all I think we should do as a body. I'm not asking for us to change anything. That's what I'm saying we should be doing to put this to bed. And whether or not, I mean, we can't reach into the arm, you know, into somebody's who's been a supervisor and is not there, yada, yada, yada. And I share Ryan's opinion on this. He called me about this also, and he said, it's not like I want to have some heavy, hardcore punitive damage thing, yada, 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 and calling our words. He's like, we don't need to do that, but we do at least need to go through a process, acknowledge something, do some sort of investigation, and then look at that, so that it doesn't continue to happen again, which is kind of Barbara's point. So that's where I'm at. I'm struggling with nothing to see here, move along, versus do we really know there's nothing to see here, move along? We should at least do a little work in investigating what these guys are saying.
What we're. Yes, I'll agree, but what we're dealing with is the complaint.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah,
That's
what I'm
one
saying.
side, that's one side of the
Right.
story. And as far as following through with that, we're gonna end up with the other side of the story that we basically have in its infancy, so to speak. There isn't much to it except what they did in a publication. That's all we really have to go on, in my mind. I don't know what else it might be, and I certainly don't want to delve into all their reasoning behind why they did what they did and what they said, why they said what they said. I don't care. I'll take it for what they said, and that's it, and analyze it my own. And I think most of the public, well, pretty obviously, most of the public did. If they paid any attention to it at all. I didn't know anything about it at all until it, you know, until it came up. And I didn't know what the hell he was talking about either, so.
But don't you agree too that, I mean, it's been happening forever,
Sure.
and it is going to continue to happen. Politics that's what it is. I mean, when you're out campaigning, you're trying to smear the other person, and, you know, as long as no one breaks the law doing it, I don't know. I mean, I've been, well, quite a few of us have been through quite a few elections. And you either can let the water run off your back and shut it off and you run again the next time, or you stay out of it. You know, I got calls from some lake association. They want to know where I stood on something. And I told them, and they said, well, then we're not going to be able to endorse you. It's like, I didn't call you for an endorsement, and I don't care if you endorse me. So, I mean, it's just, and I think probably, I would safely say 95% of the activity we never hear about. And I don't run around and tell everybody else what happened in the campaign I was in. I hear a lot of bad things about me, and it's like, well, the voters will decide at the ballot box. So I truly think we need to take the advice of our attorney. If there's nothing for this committee to do at this point, then I'm not going all over the trouble.
No, I appreciate that, and I think the part that I totally get the mud raking, we can say whatever we want about each other in the political realm. I think this rose to a different level because we had a sitting chair using the power of his chairmanship to say in this letter, election time letter, say, it is my role as the board chair to inform you that there's these activist people living in our community. So it wasn't that it was, there's these, name calling people. It was that I'm gonna, as my role as the board chair, inform you. Well, the board chair is responsible for setting the agenda, appointing people and running a meeting. They're not informed, they're not responsible for hot stirring about whatever thing that they're on. In this case, it's these extreme activists. So I think it rises a little, it's a little bit different than straight up campaign campaign smearing. It's a little bit different than that. And then the fact that this letter that Chris wrote looked so much like the letter that Steve's people got, that my people got, to me showed some sort of marriage was happening and collusion was going on between the person writing these letters and the person writing this letter. And beyond that, we don't know, which is what this investigation could potentially look at. So that's, I totally get it. I agree that there's, political, gloves are off, whatever goes on is fine. But this is a little bit different than that. And I think that's what this point, I think that's what they're probably saying. I haven't really understood all of it, but I think in my mind, that's what this is. And when I read this letter, that was my first response. Like, the chair doesn't do that. That's an overreach.
If we're going to start initiate an investigation to find out whether there's political conclusion or collusion out there, I can guarantee you there is. We don't need
Yeah.
an investigation to do that. And from some of the things that have come out from me, controversial issues over the years and back to the 70s in elections, I read these things all the time, and my main concern is how the hell they find out, about these things about me. I'm not concerned that they know,
Right.
It's the more you dig into it, the more ridiculous it gets, and you're gonna still end up with what Malia is saying. You're gonna end up at that. To come with any conclusion, you're gonna end up with that remedy. And it's a moot issue. I think
And there is a body, the Wisconsin Ethics Commission.
Yeah.
It deals with campaign finance. It deals with ethics of public officials. All of this, it reminds me of the CAFO debate in as much as take it to the state. They're the ones with the authority with the concerns that were raised in that document, in that ethics commission. The state ethics commission is the entity that would address whether there was a violation of campaign finance between political party and a candidate and not disclosing it, but all of those issues. And there's a mechanism, there's a clear mechanism to file a complaint that maybe they have, maybe they haven't, I don't know. But that's where the authority is.
I just like things more local, and we have a process laid out. I feel like when you send it to the state, it's a black. Maybe that will happen, I don't know.
I just kind of took care of it myself. Called Jay and asked, what do you do when something like this happens? Hell, I didn't know. And so I just called the person that ran against me, and we contacted each other by text, and I said, I'm sorry that was out there. I didn't have anything to do with it. And then I took it a step further, of course, went to the Republican Party and said, don't you ever do that again, without my knowledge. So, I think each person should handle it on their own. You know, I mean, that's how I did it. That's how I always do things, so. You know,
You could ask the Republican Party not to endorse you, but they have the First Amendment right to endorse you even if you don't want it,
right.
you know.
You know,
I mean,
I understand how all that worked and how that happened and stuff, but. You know, I just made it clear to the people, no, there was some people you couldn't make it clear, to, no matter how hard you tried. I mean, I was called every name in the book, but. You know, they call you a liar.
That's legal too, isn't it?
That's that water you talked about running off your back.
Yeah.
You know, you just move on. I mean. I suspect that something like this isn't likely to happen again, quite as dramatic as it was. But it might depend upon what, you know. Where it goes.
Yeah, I think that's fine. I totally agree with that. I think the nuance here that hung me up was the role of our sitting board chair. That was the part that got me stuck. Like, this person who has this power is using it in an overreach sort of fashion. That was the part where I got hung up for me.
So if Jay, as the board chair, went to a town board meeting and said, well, as a county board chair, I'm here to let you know, the issues that we're dealing with at the county and inform, I mean,
That's different.
Well, but look at the result. Where is he?
Mhm.
Uh,
Yeah.
So
True.
you talk about, if you wanted to go after him for any particular reason, or the reason that you're talking about, with the understanding that you're gonna punish him in some manner, what would the most punishable thing be? That he lose his election?
Yeah, I don't want
And it
to.
already happened.
I just want to get
The
it.
result is, I
You're right, Jay.
don't think there's no reason in investigating something that the result is already favorable in the mind of the individuals that are writing the complaint.
All right, we're gonna move on.
But
You want a motion, Jay? Are we done with, do we need anything, Malia, to put this one way or the other?
I mean, I don't know what the motion is. When you get to a discussion about future agenda items, if you don't want to continue discussing it, just don't put it there. I don't know if you would need a motion to.
I was just thinking, do we need a motion to embody what we just decided upon today?
what do you think?
I don't think we decided on anything. I
Okay,
think we're advised by court counsel that the ethics complaint that was filed was not anything this committee needed to entertain. But we're not entertaining it.
Might want to put that in the minutes, make sure that it's in the minutes and that respects and will be.
I missed it, like the last part of what you just said.
Well, we're advised by court counsel.
Okay,
There's nothing for this committee to consider. We're not considering it. Are we gonna make any recommendations for updates to the current ethics policy?
I mean, the only thing that I would recommend is something in there about closed session information. That disclosure prior to, let's say you're negotiating, I don't know, purchase of land. Sure, and, somebody then from that closed session, when you're talking strategy, goes and discloses it and hurts the county's overall bargaining position. Adding that to ethics, to your ethics code is something that I would recommend. Again, there's not a lot of teeth in what you can do if that happens. I mean, once it happens, it's outside of the information that's been disclosed, but at least then there could be sort of the committee saying that was naughty, don't do it again publicly.
Yeah, and we've had that happen.
Yeah.
We've had that happen, and it's had a big effect on a certain matter, so I think we should throw that on the next agenda and have Malia put some verbiage together for that.
To write that's gonna be a tough one, right?
I don't know, disclosure of information gained from a closed session. It's kind of, it's the insider trading. It would be using that information either to benefit yourself, your cause, or an outside organization or person.
I'm more inclined thinking along the lines of a ethics violation, true ethics violation, where an outsider is involved in the ethics of a supervisor doing a personal project with someone not involved with the county necessarily, and protecting their identity or interests in any manner. That would probably cover it. But that would be a decision made on a closed session. More, I don't know what Steve is talking about, but if it's if it's something that could be protected that we've already violated, so.
Right, again, you can't put the information back in the bag. You wouldn't be able to, but at least then you could say, hey, you violated your ethical obligation.
You think that would be simple enough to catch all?
Right now, there is nothing.
I mean, there's your general fiduciary duty to the organization. But no, there's nothing in the ethics or in state statute.
Except when we're in closed session, you reminding them that stays in there. And if anyone is taking notes, those notes cannot leave the room. But that alone is not enough.
What happens when they violate? There, you don't have a censure. There's nothing for the county board to do other than, but at least then this would be a topic on the ethics committee that.
I'll go along with Steve. Why don't you do that? Write that up.
Edit and see, okay,
I don't think we need a motion in that respect.
no, I'll just bring that forward.
And can you put in there, like, what I don't understand is like, how does the ethics board, so say somebody's in closed session, they take a piece of paper out of it. And then we, like, that become the ethics board and it reverts to the executive?
No, I think somebody would still have to make a complaint,
And
whether it's another supervisor or a member of the.
Do we become an ethics board? Just based on that, are we in theory the ethics board and we're working on this kind of discussion?
Right. In your rules of order, the executive committee shall serve as the ethics.
Yeah, but how do we go from the rules of order to body that's now deliberating the ethics?
The same way the environmental services becomes a quasi judicial, whenever there is a conditional use application based upon the complaint.
Can we, Mr. Chair, can we have one more thing for Maria to add? Can you help me with this section 7 language? And this would be like drafting for later, like. To me, the fact that we're not acting on this, like section 7A, no supervisor shall directly, not to beat a dead horse, guys, but I'm just trying to get clarity on this. I read section 7A, no supervisor shall directly or indirectly use, seek, or authority or position to control or modify political activity of another person. So if we're not thinking that this language, this complaint rises to that level, then I think we need to clean that language up about what actually that means and what would rise to the level of. So
You want examples? For example, kind of in there.
Maybe, okay, and maybe we can put our heads together on that, because it's, to me, it reads completely opposite from how you're reading it. So I think we should have a discussion about how we want it to be read in the future.
Right, so it's not lobbying other people
No,
saying, please
no.
vote, here," right, that's different. And lobbying even people to vote for or against a candidate is not using your position to control the political activities of another. But if you're saying, okay, I don't know, like Lisa Ross as the elected county clerk. I'm county board chair and I'm saying that you can't run. I mean, there would be clear situations where you're using your position to try to limit what somebody else is doing politically, running for office, not running for office.
Or influence.
But how is that any different than what Chris was trying to do with these letters? And,
It's campaigning and lobbying.
oh, that's under lab, okay.
Right, so I mean, it doesn't happen very often.
Maybe if we can clarify this language, because I
Like
completely
examples.
read it the other way.
All right, so we'll have our recommendation and updates. Next agenda. Malia will bring us some. Quick review.
Yeah.
On the full section.
Yeah. Hopefully, I'm trying new systems. Getting things done.
Taking notes.
Well, I've organized myself by committee so that I can always look and go, okay, what do I need to do this, you know, instead of just keeping everything and then hoping.
All right, we're gonna have a discussion regarding the divisional utilization of the platform. You'll lead us in that.
You okay if I do that? So that is a long sentence. And first thing I'm gonna do is try to parse it a little bit. So we have the resource that we've got is a new data analyst, Abigail Paulson, the human resource that we've got. We've also got a new platform, Power BI, which is from Microsoft, and it's a data analytic platform that also allows for the creation of graphs. So we can build things like dashboards. So, okay, what's new about that? Well, because we can do a lot of that with a tool like Excel. What we can do with this tool is we can reach into databases that the county has, the sheriff has, that are in public health, that are owned by the DA, and we can extract information and make managerial decisions with that information that we wouldn't have been able to do last year. We can also gather information that might be useful from a policy perspective, which is probably what the board and its committees would do. So if you go back in time, and I wasn't part of county government then, but someone said, hey, let's take a close look at the CJCC from a policy perspective and from a managerial perspective. And for many months, the sheriff and Chad and others rounded up data, reported it at the county board meeting. That was an example of what we can do. It was a narrow example. And so what the executive committee and other committees might consider is what do you need to learn about with respect to county operations? What would you like to learn about? And how can we, can we paint a picture using these tools for your committees around these things that you want to learn more about? So as an example, and probably not a very good one because I just thought of it, but there was a request for information about what had been going on in public health. And I think what we probably provided is a list of information. If we wanted to, we could do a historical look back on that data. We could possibly get data from other counties to compare to. We just got this capacity we haven't had before. And I'm not suggesting we should create more work around public records requests. It's just, something that's come up recently. And we did a semi-deep dive on it. If there was things that we needed to do even deeper dives than that, we have the tools to do so. And this is just, my feeling. It felt like we maybe had exhausted the managerial usefulness of talking about that CJCC data, at least for a time, and may have satisfied all of the policy needs that the board might have had for that data. So we have capacity that we can use for other tasks that you or other committees find to be important. What we may want to do is, and I think Scott Good, who's the manager in that area, is working with Abigail to go to departments and divisions and say, what do you want to learn? Some of that may bubble up in HHS or in environmental services or in public works and public safety without you all doing anything. And that's likely to happen. But if there are things that the executive committee would like to know about, or, you know, Amy's case, HHS, or your case, general government, public safety, public works, yes, then we can try to dig in on those. So that's really the point of this agenda item, is just some awareness for you all and to help you with any questions you might have.
So what you're saying is that you're trying to inform the supervisors that are ill-informed on a lot of things that they deal with.
If we can get ourselves all informed on something that's, you know, useful or interesting to you for
Right.
policy and for the departments and divisions managerially, then let's do it.
And you say that
We have
provide
this back.
a better result.
Well, I
That,
mean,
my example is highway, you know, and highway's done an excellent job over the years, in my estimation, to keep you informed of what they're doing, why they're doing it, how much it costs, why is it the cost, and how effective it's gonna be and how long it's gonna last. You can go to the, well, when Steve was there, he had a lady that just kept you totally informed on any nickel, dime, anything that you wanted to know about that highway department. I think Steve will agree with that. And so subsequently, you performed as a supervisor before we had administrator. And you knew what was going on and you spoke intelligently, and I think we made an effective decisions as a result of what you're telling us you want to afford us information. And that, boy, believe me, you know, a lot of supervisors need some information. I'm one of them. For years, I was ill-informed and making big votes and decisions with lack of information. You know, I think it's an excellent thing.
But is it the supervisors we're trying to inform or the public?
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I mean, that report we were getting on arrests, and that's to inform the public of what's happening. I mean, we're well aware as supervisors what's happening with the drug and alcohol issue in Polk County, but is the public, and do they know how many arrests have been made? Do they know how many were incarcerated? Do they know what the penalties were? And the only way we felt we're gonna get that in front of them is if we get that report at county board, they tune in to the county board meeting and get the report. Otherwise, I don't know as supervisors how relevant it is. We're well aware of it. We hear about it, but the public doesn't.
But I will say it took supervisors to say to staff, we need a report that shows this. And now,
More,
and now I
more.
think, yeah, and now I think what you're hearing is there may be capacity to think of it in different ways, not just show us the monthly, but show us historical perspective. How does that compare with traffic accidents or whatever it may be? And you know better than I do, but this is a tool we think that will help you all ask the right questions so that we can present the reports to you all. And I will say this, you know, it's not necessarily something for the public to call in and say, hey, Don, I'd like information that shows this, this, and this in a public records request. Correct me if I'm wrong. We do not create new documents. We can only pull what documents we have. And so that's what you all will ask for, is a document that says, I'd like to compare this with this or analyze it this way. Once we create it, then it becomes a public record.
Well, would this be an example? So I've had two questions from constituents. One was around, what is the county doing on truancy and what's the role? This is a teacher, and they said, we have such a problem with truancy, what's going on? And I'm like, I don't know. So that would be maybe one thing. And but you know, Tanya's kind of helping me understand that it's not a county thing, it's a district thing, and yada, 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 but at some point it does bubble to the county. And then the other one was around the number of people that are unhoused in our county. And I don't know, the answer is. I know it's a growing issue, so.
Well, I'll just address the truancy, and that is a district issue, but if the supervisors were interested in learning about it, we might be able to compile district data from the 8 districts and present it on a historical timeline. For the
Right.
supervisors.
I know.
So it doesn't necessarily have to be our data. If you want the data for reasons of policy, then you should ask us for it, and we will do our best. And that might be informative for the public as well. I mean, I think that's a very useful lens to think about this in your role. Can't tell you what you should do, but yes, we don't need it to be only our, in our county data warehouses. We can go out somewhere else and get it. DPI would be, would keep that kind of information.
So are you asking the board chairs, I'm thinking like the questions that I get from. Should we develop a list of questions that we want answers on, things we want to kind of delve into a little bit? How do you want us to get back to you?
Yeah, what's the path for getting things done, right? I would say I don't know if you need anything as formal as that, at least not initially. We could easily overwhelm the person who's doing this work if we're not careful. But if there are, within your own committee or across the board in general, things that you just really need to know about, I would say bring them up, get them on, make sure they're noted in the minutes. And the staff that attends those meetings is aware. And then we've got these channels where the division directors and departments are meeting with IT, and Abigail Paulson's the lady that does this. She's got a list already, but we want to get important things on her list with you.
So the challenge, if I may, is we have to prioritize. Because, we can sit and think of a million questions. And that wouldn't be fair to Abigail, to Don, or to any of us to say, here are questions to answer. Part of my job will be to prioritize, and that depends on what the committees say. So if your committee can prioritize things and the more clarity on what you're seeking, that enables us to dedicate the appropriate resources.
Well, the unhoused pieces keeps coming up, and people keep asking the committee. So that might be something that.
And in fact, we are working on that. The challenge is we're trying to pull together a lot of information and define and find out what that definition or things that you're actually looking for. I mean, there are different definitions for that. We're finding.
Did we give you enough committee? We haven't really even talked about it. Maybe do you need more?
I think at the HHS staff committee meeting, you're going to get a brief update.
Okay.
We're not ready to say here it is, but we're going to be able to break out who is unhoused in the county, and you'll see a wide range. And then you're going to say this number represents this kind of person. This larger number represents all these different types. So then the question might be, which do you want to go after? Which do you want to try and address?
Well, and this teacher that brought this up to me tied it to the homeless, the unhoused piece, this truancy stuff, those two often. So then all of a sudden, here we go. Anyway, okay.
Is somehow, are we gonna, is it just gonna be what one committee wants? And then they're gonna put someone to work on it, or is this something that could maybe go in front of the board? I mean, the last one came in front of the board, the board decided they wanted this report, and they wanted it monthly. Either that, or I mean, I could just see them shooting in from all sides on you,
Yeah.
and it's like, does everyone want that report, or does just one supervisor want it and has convinced the committee
Right.
to do it?
It's all of the above. That's one of the biggest challenges and I don't know that there's an exact science or that we want to make an exact science, but sometimes there's a topic that's been bubbling and brewing. Unhoused. Okay. That was merely, and it was brought up in a committee, but Jay called also. And so it's in those cases, I will call up Tanya and say, Tanya, we need to do a deeper dive in these areas. Here's what I think we need to look at first. In other cases, I'll get a supervisor call me and say, I want to know this. I think we ought to do this. And it's something, well, you're going to have to get a committee to say that's relevant because, you know, it's not something that I'm hearing about. It's not something maybe that I've, you know, so, because you can get one-offs from people all the time. And then, but when a committee brings it up and there's a consensus or a vote that says this is a topic we'd like to delve into, then that director, I think, and I will get together, and that's how we plot the next.
And then if you feel that it's gonna require too much time and effort for what they're asking for, you may then bring it to the entire county board and say, is this something that, you know, majority wants, or are we just doing this for a couple of people?
Right. There have been times when I have had to say, I'm not gonna do that unless you get either your committee, or if your committee says that, then I think you're gonna have to go to the full board. A lot of times it may be a committee wants it, but maybe the chair says, I don't think so. And so maybe that's when you bring it to the full board. But I can't say there's an exact path. But if enough supervisors want it, or if it's a topic that's bubbling up, or if the staff says it's a big enough issue, then that's when we get at it.
You couldn't say for sure that it's not gonna be individual supervisor.
If it's an individual supervisor says, I want this, if it's not a topic that has been relevant, I'll say no. I'll say, go to a committee or go to the board. But there have been supervisors who say, I think this is an important topic. The supervisor asked for, hey, we're looking at command center. I want to know how many, and it was a public record request, so we had to do it, but he said, how many vaccines have we actually distributed in that command center? That is a public record request. We said, yeah, do it, but we didn't do anything else.
So that's different than what Don's talking about, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I maybe misstep by using the public records request as an
No,
example of
yeah.
where we could have done a deep dive. We didn't do a deep,
Yeah.
and we didn't pull all this machinery out and set it to work on this problem. I mean, it feels to me like what Vince is saying is right. If something comes up through committee and it gets the attention of a committee, we may be able to work on it. But certainly if it comes up to the whole board level, we will make a priority of doing so. Right now, what's going on is we're harvesting managers' requests. So they're generally speaking, trying to get managerially useful information out of our systems. Now, how many open positions do we have in the organization? Right now, we actually have to ask all the department managers to write it down on a sheet of paper. We should just be able to grab it out of our database. So, you know, to me, trying to get the budget ready for this next year, knowing how many open positions we have, sounds like a really good idea. Without having to ask managers to remember and write things down on a sticky note and hand it to me. So I've asked for this resource to tackle that problem. Because it's a managerially useful thing to do. I just want to make the board aware that we can do the process Vince is talking about, you know, handle some things that you want to do as well. We're not going to stop doing the CJCC data. We collect it every month anyway. If you want to have us present it every month, we can do so, or we don't need to. I mean, you mentioned the sort of public aspect of it. It was just my sense that the board itself was not finding the information particularly useful anymore. But, you know, we can show up at a board meeting and give you whatever you want.
Well, that information was very useful to promote the program as
Yes.
it grew over the years. Extremely important.
And I think if that to me is the starting point. You know, what it became was this month, 18 arrests, next month, 19. What we can do now is to try and look at trends, look at correlations, look at relationships. And when we look at that on a monthly basis, when we say, hey, this is worth presenting to make a point or to ask a question, that would be the appropriate time, I think, to present it again. You know, maybe a regular basis, but maybe not every month.
Yeah, quarterly. I mean, I think that information would be good to get quarterly so that staff ain't working on it monthly. You know, quarterly would be nice to know where it's at.
Plus it keeps you aware of what's going on.
Yeah.
People that don't go to the CJCC meeting.
But just on the topic of something, I think, just to, maybe in my mind, clarify this. So feels to me like if it comes out of committee, if the committee feels like it's important enough, we should do it. Is that our sense? Or does it have to go, if somebody doesn't like the issue, so it's got to go to the board?
Generally, if a committee says important, like if HHS and Tanya's there and you were talking about the unhoused, Tanya said we can pull that information. Now, if you say we're gonna stop world hunger, you know, which sometimes people get real excited and they say stuff like that. You know, that's when, if Tanya doesn't, I'll probably say to Tanya and to that chairperson, we're gonna have to wait on that a little bit, you know, and figure out, kind of define it better.
See how many start.
Right. Kind of think of an example we had not too long ago.
We got one committee using up all the time. You know, they keep
Right.
coming up with stuff that they want
Right.
this on. Pretty soon the other committees don't get a chance to even get the information to the staff. So tied up on keeping this committee so informed that the rest of us.
But if a supervisor had a resolution suggestion and an idea, I mean, I do feel a little more obligated then to say, well, let's look into that. If this is what you want, how do you want to proceed?
Because that is going to county board.
That would have to go to
So
council.
then you would do some research on, have some facts, and
Right.
some data to support it versus just gathering facts and data because somebody wants.
Yeah.
Facts and data.
And sometimes people just say, I think we're gonna have a resolution. And I may say, I don't know where you're going with this. And I'm not sure, you know, it's gonna be worthwhile. That's when I throw it back to them to say, you put together your ideas. And then we'll start digging in a little bit.
All right, anybody else got a comment on the information on the platform? I don't know if it's relevant, but I did see an ad in the paper the other day from was it Land and Water? And they're almost crashing Polk County lakes. I thought, holy smokes, how did this get in here? But, you know, they're talking about the blue-green algae and but it kind of come off to me like, stay away from our lakes. I don't know if that's relevant.
The anti-tourism committee.
I don't know, it just.
I'll look into that. Yeah, I'll have to.
It's
I'm
just the way it
sure.
read. It's just the way the ad read. It's like something like, you know, stay away from these waters or stay away from, I don't.
It's better than
Well-
the alternative was when we got the information after the dog died from
Yeah.
swimming in the lake, you know?
Yeah,
That was a big issue.
Oh,
here.
yeah, that's right.
okay.
I did see that.
If
Yeah,
you-
it's the toxic stuff.
That ad?
I think that's the one I.
Did it strike you as like saying stay away from?
Yeah, I wasn't gonna let my dog swim in that lake.
Polk County
They
lakes?
want to keep their
Yeah.
dogs
We're
out.
obligated.
Yeah.
If the lake
report
has
that?
it, report it, so that people don't drive in from.
That
Maple
was a
Grove
big
was
issue a
killed
few
in.
years ago when the dog died in Bear Trap Lake. And
But I'll ask.
they really publicized that part of it. That draws attention.
I would only say, you know, that could be statistical information that, you know, what is going on. with
Yeah.
That's all I'm gonna relate my comment to.
Well done.
All right, anybody have anything else on that? Right, what's our update on negotiations on the fairgrounds MOU?
Joe, I don't know if he is on. Anna.
I will say this, Mo is not here, and I know Mo will be there, and I get copied on all these emails, and I will just say that in your discussion, as owners of the properties and many of the buildings, it's important that an appropriate process be followed. And you know, so every once in a while, we'll hear about something that's being done at the fairgrounds, and Mo will send an email that says, hey, before you remodel that building, or before you design, you tear something down or whatever, you have to go through our process. If you're gonna rebuild, heck, did you get the appropriate bid? If you got a grant, what was the grant for and how is it being used? The thing I would ask is we gotta make sure that if we're gonna be partners, that we have to agree on the process, I guess, that's what I'm saying. And sometimes it's very easy for somebody to say, hey, I'm in charge of this organization. We need to do this. Let's do it. Bam, make it happen. And that's admirable. But we all know we're the ones that are liable for everything. So it has to go through us.
And did we get a rescheduled date on negotiations? Because our last one was canceled.
No, not that I'm aware of. There was also significant turnover on the fair board. Tracy resigned, two other people resigned. And so I don't know if that has shifted things as far as how they're approaching working with Rory, their attorney. But no, to my knowledge, it hasn't been rescheduled, and I'll send a message to Joe right now.
And do you know why it was canceled?
It was canceled because Rory was returning from Ireland. And I believe, I don't know if he returned the day of, or it was just a travel situation. In addition, Rory wanted this committee to have taken their redraft and then drafted something new and send it back. So there's a misunderstanding on what was the next step.
Is that our next step? Are we responsible for redrafting?
No, the next step is a reschedule of the meeting to sit down and try to talk through, make a list of where everybody agrees, kind of like tentative agreement on this, so we can set those aside and then get to the meat.
We didn't really get to that at the last meeting. No, we didn't really start it, though. We're just waiting for a date. Okay.
But there is a draft MOU out there with the changes.
Yeah, we sent to them and then they sent us, I guess, a counter. Right, and so now it's to sit down
And go through the counter and the suggestions.
All right, so we'll be looking forward to another rescheduled meeting. All right, how about our 2022 committee work plan? Need to add anything?
I think we're on schedule.
Budget. On schedule so far, we've already jumped ahead of ourselves. Then we do the annual performance review of the county administrator already.
So that's the final draft of the revised contract is going to be at the next executive, and then you'll put that forward to the full county board.
So we're not ahead.
Say that again?
You're on time. You already did the evaluation. Joe just confirmed it has not been rescheduled yet.
So on the valuation, did you get back to us? Are you re-upping with us, or what did your wife give you the number?
No, I have, we don't have the final contract from you yet,
Okay.
but what we've talked and agreed on. in principle.
So then you'll look at the contract and then give us the yay or nay.
Yeah.
It's one of those things too, where, I mean, even if he signed it, full county board would still need to act on it. So I'm sure there's a,
Right, the plan is for me to sign.
Okay, and we'll act on it in October.
We are reviewing our committee work plan.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else for the work plan?
Well, October we will. I'm sure Lisa got to have possibly an update from our corporate council on ethics. Budget amendment.
And then on the statistical information on the platform, are you kind of presenting to all the committees? Or just to this one?
Well, I think right now it's just this one. I was imagining that because Scott and Abigail are working with departments and division directors, that they're thinking about what you might want to hear about at each of the, for ES, for HHS, stuff like that. If you think it would be beneficial to give a condensed version of our discussion, have a condensed version of our discussion in other committee meetings, I'm open to doing that.
Well, I think it'd be nice if some of the work could get out to all the supervisors, but it isn't gonna be a individual supervisor request that it needs to, if you have something you want, get it to the appropriate committees and then work from that way.
So,
I just didn't know if it was gonna end here.
Yeah.
Or they can call me too.
It might be something where you would go, yeah, that's really good. I think it's good for the organization.
Right.
Well, you know.
You know, it's something that I'm hearing or I'm seeing or saying, gosh, you know, this, we've got a challenge here, and then somebody comes with an idea and it's like, let's go with it.
So are we gonna kind of keep that on our agenda so we keep getting an update of how it's developing?
well, it seems like there's parts, it sounds like there's enthusiasm for reviewing the CJCC data every quarter. So we could put that on every 3 months, put it on the agenda. If you wanted, as this goes forward in time, there might be something making this up from HHS on the off quarter and then ES on the other off quarter and dot, dot, dot. So feels to me like we're moving toward almost calendarization of this. And it's been every month for CJCC, but we can now, I don't know if we need a motion for this or it's just a,
Put it on the
put it
agenda.
on the agenda, you know, every 3 months and then understand that you've got flexibility with CJCC data isn't being presented, perhaps get a report on something else that's useful. Interesting.
And in the same way that we all get CJCC, we're not on that committee, I would love to see all the other committees. I don't know how you're thinking of presenting it, but I would love to have, present something to HHS, environmental services, whatever. I'd love to see all of that.
And didn't, we also talked about though, making it a quick board presentation, did we not? You know, like we used to do CJC, see it near the end of each meeting. Instead of doing that every month, maybe 1 month it's CJCC, another month it's another topic.
Well, we do collect them. We do every month collect the data. It's just how often does anybody want to review it with us? And maybe I misunderstood, but I thought we would, for the full board, we would drop back to once a quarter for the CJCC information. So every 3 months. Now, maybe I misheard that. I don't want to put words in supervisors' mouths. But that's an option for sure.
I think you heard that correctly. But Vince's point is that we're collecting the data all the time. and We're gonna see it every 3 months in that 1 month.
All right, so is that gonna stay on our agenda or not?
I feel like it, if we could, perhaps we could update you when we have something else come through that would benefit the full board to know about. That makes sense.
So leave it on there in case there's something. This is a sort of a standing.
Then we X through it if it's not gonna happen. Yeah, that's fine. Want to keep progress. That helps us make progress, right?
What we can do is update when the agendas come out. Maybe we say, oh, this coming month, exactly, we want to talk about HHS. This, you know, and we can update the agenda so people know what it is. If we don't have an update on there, it may be something that we skip over.
And since this is a little in flux, it might be nice to have it at least in 1 month, just to kind of nail it all down.
It's fair.
All right. Drifted into our subject matter for our next meeting. But I guess that happens with committee work time. Anything else for our subject matters?
Well, Malia, will you give us, if there's, will there be, I'm just wondering if anything happens with this ethics complaint, if you can update us on that, if you hear nothing, you can just wait back.
Sure, well, I'm gonna,
Get that on the agenda.
yeah, the language, I'll have a language draft for closed session, examples of conduct that would violate the one clause, and then you would like
And I'm just talking about if anything happens, with this complaint, if anything with the actual complaint, we can, well,
So like if the DA
I don't know.
changes.
yeah, get something else back to them or something.
Yeah, I'll make sure it gets put on the agenda. If there's anything.
And you can say nothing.
Any other subject matters anyone wants on the next agenda?
And you have the administrator contract on there.
That'll be on.
And it'll be a closed session just for good measure.
All right, one item to go.
So move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Adjourned at 10:01, 10.